If you don't want to rot in a nursing home, go get yourself a job. That's what my son screamed at me in the kitchen of the house I helped him buy. I didn't say a word back. I just zipped up my old leather suitcase, walked past him, and never turned around. "Dad, where do you think you're going with that bag?" he yelled from the porch, but I kept walking. And right at that moment, a long black car pulled up to the curb in front of the house. And out stepped the woman nobody in that family even knew existed. If this story hits something inside you, please subscribe to the channel. Every single day I share real stories about ordinary people, the kind of stories that don't make the news but happen in every neighborhood in America. And tell me down in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 71 years old. And 3 days ago I walked out of my son's house in Chicago for the very last time. Now look, it wasn't a sudden decision. It wasn't some impulsive thing. It was the slow, quiet death of months and months of small humiliations. Of silences that screamed louder than any insult ever could. Of looks across the dinner table that told me the same thing every single night. You don't belong here, old man. But there was one specific moment when something inside me just cracked. One sentence. 6 words. 6 words that erased 50 years of being a father like they were nothing but dust on the floor. If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, get a job. My son said it, looking right into my eyes. No hesitation. No shame. No regret. And in that single second, something broke that I don't think can ever be put back together. I want you to listen close, because if you're somebody who's ever felt invisible inside your own family, this is going to feel familiar. That morning started, like every other miserable morning had started for the last 8 months. I woke up before sunrise. I always did in that house. Not because the bed was uncomfortable, but because every single night I drifted off feeling like my breathing was annoying somebody, like my heartbeat was an inconvenience. Like the air I was using up belonged to people who paid for it. I got dressed in the dark, in that tiny 8x8 room they'd given me. The room with one little window that faced nothing but the gray brick wall of the neighbor's garage. "It's just temporary, Dad," Daniel had told me when I moved in. "Just till you get back on your feet." 8 months later, I was still sleeping in a room that smelled faintly of mildew and old cardboard boxes, listening to my son and his wife whispering on the other side of the wall every single night. Plotting, planning, trying to figure out how to get rid of me. I crept down the stairs like a ghost. I'd memorized which steps creaked. Step 3 from the top, step 7, the second to last. I knew how to open the bathroom door without the hinges squealing. I had learned how to exist without making a sound. Now think about that for a minute. A grown man, a father, a man who fought for his country, who worked 40 years in a steel mill outside Gary, Indiana. A man who tiptoed through his own son's house like a thief, afraid of being caught. That's what they had reduced me to. When I got to the kitchen, Daniel was already there. He was sitting at the table in that navy blue tie I bought him 3 Christmases ago when he got his promotion at the insurance firm. He was scrolling through his phone, sipping coffee, and when he looked up and saw me, his face just twisted, like my showing up had ruined his morning. "Morning, son," I said. He didn't answer me. He just let out one of those long, heavy sighs. The kind of sigh that says everything without saying anything at all. The kind of sigh that says, "I wish you weren't here." I poured myself coffee into an old chipped mug, the blue one with the faded fishing logo. Rachel didn't use that mug anymore because she said it didn't match the new farmhouse-style kitchen she'd remodeled with money I had partially paid for. I sat at the very edge of the table, as far from Daniel as I could get, trying to take up as little space as possible, trying not to breathe too loud, trying not to exist too much. And let me tell you something, if you've ever felt this, if you've ever felt yourself shrinking inside a room full of family, I want you to know I see you. I see you because I lived it. The silence in that kitchen was thick, heavy, like the air right before a thunderstorm rolls in off Lake Michigan. Daniel kept staring at his phone, typing something fast. Then I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. Rachel. And I knew right then. I knew the storm was about to hit. Rachel walked into the kitchen in her pink flowered robe, hair pulled back tight, jaw already set. She saw me, didn't greet me, just walked straight to the sink, turned the faucet on harder than she needed to, and started washing dishes that were already clean. I knew that move. I'd seen it dozens of times. It was her silent way of saying, I am furious, and it's all your fault. And without saying a single word, Daniel looked up from his phone, looked at her, then looked at me. And that's when I knew this wasn't random. This was rehearsed. They had talked about this before I even came downstairs. They had decided what they were going to say, and I was about to be sentenced. Dad, Daniel said, putting his phone face down on the table. His voice was cold. The same voice I'd heard him use with the people he had to fire at work. We need to talk. I gripped that mug tight. The heat burned my fingers, but I didn't let go. About what, son? I asked, even though, honest to God, I already knew. He rubbed his hand down his face like he was already exhausted by me before the conversation had even started. About this, Dad, he said, and he made this little sweeping gesture with his hand. The kitchen, the house, my whole life, reduced to one dismissive flick of his wrist. It can't keep going like this. Rachel turned the faucet off, spun around, and crossed her arms. I felt like a man on trial waiting for the jury to come back. Now I want you, watching this, I want you to understand what's about to happen, because this is the moment everything pivots. Your kids, they don't break your heart all at once. They do it in slow motion. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table, looking at me with those eyes that used to light up every time I walked through the door when he was little. Eyes that now just looked tired of me. I work 10 hours a day, Dad. Rachel works too. We pay for this house. We pay for the food. We pay for everything. And you. You just spend all day at the public library walking around like you're on vacation. Do you have any idea what it costs to keep you here? Every word was a knife. Not because the words were unfair, but because they were coming from the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. Then Rachel jumped in, and her voice was even worse, because there wasn't a drop of guilt in it. Walter, we understand you're grieving. Your wife passed away 2 years ago. We know that was a terrible thing. Massive heart attack. Nobody saw it coming. But it's been 2 years now. You have to move on. You can't keep living in the past and expecting us to support you forever. Support. That word again. Like I hadn't worked 40 years on the floor of a steel mill. Like I hadn't paid every penny of Daniel's college tuition at Northern Illinois. Like I hadn't sold my prized Ford pickup truck back in '83 to pay the medical bills when he almost died of pneumonia at 6 years old. None of it counted. None of it. Like I was some stranger off the street begging for charity. I tried to speak. The words were burning in my throat. But Daniel just kept going. Dad, you're 71, but you're still healthy. There are jobs for guys your age. Greeter at the supermarket. Security at a parking garage. Doing yard work for the neighbors. Whatever. But you can't just sit around all day expecting us to solve your life. We have plans. Rachel wants to take an Alaskan cruise this summer. We want to redo the basement. And we can't do any of it because we're paying for all your stuff. An Alaskan cruise. That's what I was an obstacle to. A cruise. Me. The man who changed his diapers. Who slept upright in a hospital chair, holding his hand for 5 nights straight. Who carried him on my shoulders through 2 feet of Chicago snow because the bus broke down. And then he said it. He leaned in closer. He looked me dead in the eye. He didn't blink. If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, Dad, go get yourself a job. He said it slowly, word by word, like he wanted to make sure each one landed deep. And in that moment something inside me went dark. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness. It was something worse than that. It was acceptance. It was the realization that the son I had raised, the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the young man who cried into my flannel shirt when his first girlfriend dumped him at 16, that son didn't exist anymore. The man sitting across from me was a stranger who saw me as a problem on a spreadsheet, as trash that needed taking out. I tried to defend myself. I said, "Son, I give you my entire pension every month, $800. Every penny. I don't keep a dime." And that was true. Every single month when my pension check came in from the Steelworkers Union, I handed the whole thing to Daniel. Every dollar. Rachel laughed. Actually laughed. "Walter, $800 doesn't even cover the utility bills. Do you know what your blood pressure medication alone runs us?" Daniel nodded. "800 is nothing, Dad. Nothing. That's why we're saying you need to get a job. So you actually contribute. So you actually help. Help. 40 years on the mill floor. a pension that bought me nothing, and it still wasn't enough. Now listen, I want to tell you something I've been thinking about ever since that morning. If I were watching this happen to somebody else, somebody else's father, I'd want to grab that son by the shoulders and ask him just one thing. When did your father stop being a person to you? When did he turn into a line item? Because that doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, and it happens because nobody ever stopped to ask. I didn't say another word. I just stood up, put the mug in the sink, walked up the stairs. I heard Rachel whisper something to Daniel behind me. I didn't want to know what it was. I went into that little 8x8 room, the room that smelled like defeat, and I pulled my old leather suitcase out from under the bed. The same suitcase I'd arrived with 8 months earlier, when I still believed my son loved me. And I started packing. My few clothes, my handful of books, the framed photo of Maggie that sat on the nightstand. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking with something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Because in that moment I finally understood something. I didn't have to stay where I wasn't wanted, and I didn't know where the hell I was going. But I knew anywhere on God's green earth was better than this house. As I folded my shirts into that suitcase, the memories came at me like waves. I couldn't stop them. I saw Daniel in every piece of clothing I touched. I saw the little boy he used to be, the son I would have walked through fire for, and I kept asking myself the same question over and over. When did everything break? When did I stop being his hero? When did I become his burden? I closed my eyes, and I went back 42 years, to the worst night of my life. Daniel was 6 years old. It was the middle of February in Chicago, the kind of cold that cracks your knuckles and freezes the tears on your face. He had been running a fever for 3 days straight. Maggie and I thought it was just a winter cold. We gave him children's Tylenol, bundled him up in his bear's blanket. But the fever wouldn't break. On that third night, Daniel started talking out of his head, saying things that didn't make sense. Crying, shaking. Maggie came running into the living room where I was reading the paper. "Walt," she said, and her voice cracked. "Something is wrong. Something is really, really wrong." We rushed him to the public hospital on the south side. Severe pneumonia, the doctor said. Critical condition. He needed to be admitted right then. And if he didn't improve in 24 hours, well, they didn't finish that sentence. And they didn't have to. The public hospital was overcrowded, underfunded. They told us tests could take days. Then a young nurse pulled me aside in the hallway. "If you can get him to Northwestern," she whispered, "they'll treat him fast. They have everything he needs." Maggie looked at me, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I drove home through the snow. I grabbed the title to my Ford pickup, the truck I'd saved 2 years to buy, the truck I washed every Sunday morning in the driveway, the truck that was my one little piece of pride. I called a guy I knew from the union who bought used trucks for cash. I told him I needed money tonight. "How much can you give me right now?" I asked. He lowballed me, offered me half what it was worth. I took it. There was no time to negotiate. With cash in my pocket, I drove back to that hospital. I told Maggie, "Pack his stuff. We're transferring him." At Northwestern, everything was different. Clean private room, big windows, doctors moving fast, new medication within an hour, tests within 2. Maggie sat next to Daniel's bed, stroking his sweaty little hair, humming the lullabies her mother used to sing. I stood by the window staring out at the frozen city, thinking about the truck I'd just sold, thinking about how many years it would take me to save up for another one, and not regretting it, not for 1 second, because my son, my whole world, was lying in that bed, and there is no price you wouldn't pay. If you've ever been a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Daniel spent 5 days in that hospital. 5 days I slept in a plastic chair next to his bed in the same Carhartt jacket I'd come in with, eating sandwiches Maggie brought from home, never leaving his side. On the third night, Daniel woke up. He looked at me with those big brown eyes still cloudy with fever, and in this tiny weak voice he said, "Daddy, are you always going to be here?" "Always, son," I told him, squeezing his little hand. "Always." He smiled and went back to sleep, and I sat there in that dark hospital room, and I cried for the first time in 3 days. Cried like a baby. When they finally let us take him home, Maggie made him chicken noodle soup. I carried him up the stairs to his room because he was still too weak to climb them. I tucked him into bed, pulled his cub's blanket over him, and he hugged me with those skinny little arms, and he whispered into my ear words I never forgot. "Thank you, Daddy. When I grow up, I'm going to take care of you forever. I promise." I kissed his forehead. "You don't have to promise me anything, kiddo. I take care of you because I love you, that's all." But he insisted. "No, Daddy, I promise. I won't ever leave you alone." I believed him. I tucked that promise away in my chest like it was a treasure. The years after that were rough. Without the truck, I had to take 2 buses to the steel mill. I left the house at 4:30 in the morning. I got home at 8 at night. I never complained. I worked every overtime shift they offered. I saved every dollar so Daniel could have what I never did. When he turned 8, I bought him a brand new red Schwinn bike with chrome handlebars. He screamed and hugged me, and told me I was the best dad in the whole world. When he turned 12, I paid for his little league fees and his swimming lessons at the YMCA, even though it meant I skipped lunch most days. I watched him win his first trophy at a school track meet. I cried in the bleachers. By the time Daniel started high school, I was almost 50. My knees were already shot from the mill floor. My back cracked every morning when I got out of bed, but I kept working, kept paying, because I wanted Daniel to have what I never had: an education, an opportunity, a real future. I sent him to a Catholic prep school in the suburbs, the kind where the other kids' fathers showed up in BMWs, and I showed up on the city bus. I didn't care. He got good grades. He was smart. He was going to be somebody. Every overtime shift, every skipped lunch, every winter where I wore the same ratty work coat for 5 years instead of buying a new one, it was all worth it. When he graduated high school, Daniel hugged me on the football field in his cap and gown. He looked at me and Maggie standing there with tears running down our faces. "Dad," he said, "this is all because of you. Thank you for every single sacrifice. When I start working, I'm going to pay you back. Every cent. I'll never forget what you did." I told him he didn't owe me a thing, that being his father was the greatest gift of my life. He smiled. "I'll pay you back anyway, Dad. You'll see." And I believed him, because you always believe your kids. Always. But you know what I've learned in 71 years on this earth? The promises kids make. They're like smoke, beautiful while they last, and then they just disappear into the wind. Daniel went to college, met Rachel, got hired at the insurance firm, got married, had Tyler and Sophie, and little by little, without me even noticing, he stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped remembering, until 2 years ago when Maggie collapsed in our kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon making chicken salad, massive heart attack, gone before the ambulance got there, and then Daniel came back. Not because he missed me, but because now I had nobody else to take care of me. And standing there in front of that half-packed suitcase, I finally understood the most painful truth of all. A child's love only lasts as long as that child needs you. The day you become the one who needs them is the day the promises die. Maggie. Margaret Brennan. She was 68 years old. 68 years of warm laughter and morning crossword puzzles and afternoon soap operas. She died on a Tuesday in April, just an ordinary Tuesday. While she was making lunch, I was in the recliner reading the Tribune. I heard a thump in the kitchen. Just one dull thump. I thought she'd dropped a pan. "You okay, hon?" I called. No answer. I got up. I walked into the kitchen. And there she was, lying on the linoleum, eyes wide open staring at the ceiling, hand clutched against her chest. Massive coronary, the paramedic told me later. She didn't suffer, sir. That was the only mercy. She didn't suffer. Daniel got to the hospital 2 hours later. I was already sitting in a metal folding chair down the hallway. No tears yet. I couldn't cry. I couldn't believe it. He came running down that hallway with Rachel right behind him, both of them in their work clothes like they'd dropped everything. He hugged me hard. "Dad, I'm so sorry," he said. And he cried right onto my shoulder like he used to when he was a little boy. I patted his back. "It's okay, son. It's okay." The 3 of us stood there in that cold, tiled hallway, crying for the woman who'd given us everything. The funeral was that Thursday. Small, simple, just the way Maggie would have wanted. Daniel paid for everything. The casket, the flowers, the plot at Mount Carmel. "Don't worry about it, Dad," he said. "I got it. I thanked him. I thought my son was being generous. I thought he was taking care of me through my grief. But months later, in the middle of an argument, Rachel threw it in my face. "We paid $4,600 for your wife's funeral, Walter, and you've never even properly thanked us." And that's when I understood. It hadn't been generosity. It had been an investment, a favor they were planning to cash in. And now, if I were watching this story happen to somebody else, I'd want to scream at the screen. I'd want to say, never let anybody put a price tag on your grief. Never. The first months after Maggie was gone were the darkest months of my life. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning reaching for her side of the bed, smelling her pillow, which after a few weeks didn't smell like her anymore. The house was a museum of her. Her crossword book on the coffee table, her cardigan on the back of the kitchen chair, her hunting, her slippers by the door. I couldn't throw any of it away. Daniel started calling on Sundays. "How are you holding up, Dad?" "Fine, son, just keeping busy." But I wasn't fine. I was drowning, sinking into a hole I couldn't climb out of. He started visiting on Sundays with Rachel and the kids. They brought lasagna. We watched the Bears game. I clung to those Sundays like a man clinging to a life raft, but the visits got shorter, from 3 hours to 2, from 2 to 1. Rachel always had a reason. "The kids have homework. We have an early morning. Traffic's bad on the Kennedy." Daniel just nodded along, and I'd watch their car pull out of the driveway feeling more alone than before they came. The phone calls thinned out too, from twice a week to once, from once to every other week. And when he did call, it was perfunctory, like he was checking off a chore. "Hey Dad, how's it going?" "Good, good. Listen, I got a meeting. I'll call you back." He didn't call back. One day in October I called him. It was my 70th birthday. Nobody had called. Nobody had come by. I'd sat at the kitchen window all day waiting for somebody to remember me. By 8 at night I couldn't take it. I dialed his number. "Son," I said, my voice cracking. "It's my birthday." There was a long silence on the other end. "Oh, Dad. Oh, man. I'm sorry. Work has been crazy. Happy birthday. I'll bring you something this weekend." He didn't bring anything that weekend, or the next one, or ever. And that's when I realized. My birthday didn't matter. I didn't matter. 6 months after Maggie was gone, Daniel made me the offer. He came over alone on a Sunday. No Rachel. No kids. He sat on the couch where Maggie used to do her crosswords. Hands clasped. Serious face. "Dad, you can't keep living alone in this house. It's too big. There's too many memories. It's not healthy." "What are you saying?" I asked. "I want you to come live with us. We've got a spare room. Not huge, but it's comfortable. That way you're not alone, and we can take care of you." And a flood of hope hit me. "Really, son?" I asked. He nodded. "Really, Dad. You're my father. It's my job." And I believed him. Of course I did. He was my boy. I sold the house. The house Maggie and I had lived in for 42 years. The house where we'd raised Daniel, where we'd had Christmas mornings and Easter dinners and 10,000 ordinary nights. Daniel handled the paperwork. "It's better this way, Dad." The house sold for $160,000. I gave Daniel half, $80,000. "To remodel your house, son, so I won't be a burden." He hugged me. "Thanks, Dad. You're so generous." The other $80,000 I put in a savings account at the credit union. "For emergencies," I told him. "For the future." But when Rachel found out, she looked at me different, like that money was already spoken for, like it was just a matter of time before it became hers. And me, fool that I was, I didn't understand that look. Not until much later. The first weeks at their house were strange. I tried to help. Doing dishes, sweeping, helping with dinner. Rachel would stop me. "No, Walter. You don't load the dishwasher right. Let me. No, Walter. You sweep the wrong way. Just go relax." At first I thought she was being kind. Then I realized. She didn't want me touching anything because nothing was mine. Because I was a guest. An inconvenient guest. The grandkids hugged me at first. Tyler was 12. Sophie was 7. "Grandpa, it's so cool you live here." But little by little they stopped touching me. Rachel would say, "Leave Grandpa alone, he's tired." And they'd back away. And I'd be left in that little room wondering when it had all gone wrong. In the third month, Daniel asked me at breakfast, "Dad, I need that pension check from now on, the full 800, every month, to help with the house." I nodded. "Of course, son." And from that month on, I didn't have a dollar in my pocket. Not for a coffee, not for a haircut, not for a card to send my sister in Florida. And every month, Rachel still complained. "It's not enough, Walter. It's just not enough." And I started asking myself a question I didn't want to answer. If my money isn't enough, why did they even bring me here? And then I figured it out. They didn't bring me here because they loved me. They brought me here because I was an obligation, a burden, a problem they were trying to manage. I'd been there 4 months when I overheard the words that broke something. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was reading in my room, trying not to be a nuisance. The walls in that house were thin, and when Rachel started talking to Daniel in the kitchen, I heard every word. "It smells old in here," she said. "Like medicine, like mothballs, like old people stuff. I'm embarrassed to have my friends over." I froze on the bed, book open in my lap, couldn't move. I waited for Daniel to defend me, to say, "Rachel, that's my father, don't talk about him that way." He didn't. What he said was worse. "I know, I've noticed too. I'll tell him to air out his room and shower more." I showered every single day, every day. But it wasn't enough. My existence smelled bad to her. That afternoon I walked to the Walgreens on the corner. I bought 5 different air fresheners. Lavender, pine, citrus, floral, ocean breeze. $40 of money I'd been hiding in the lining of my suitcase. I came home and I sprayed every square inch of that little room. I opened the window even though it was 40 degrees outside. I showered again. Put on cologne, the drugstore kind. I smelled like a perfume counter. But I wasn't going to be an embarrassment. Rachel never said a word about it. Never said thank you. Just went on with her life like I wasn't there. But she started doing other things. Small things. She got rid of my recliner. The old brown one I sat in to watch the evening news. I gave it to Goodwill, Walter. It was too old. Living room looks more modern now. More modern without my old things. Tyler stopped coming to me for help with his math homework. Mom says I should just look up YouTube tutorials, Grandpa. Your way is too old-fashioned. Old-fashioned. The man who taught him to count with cereal at the kitchen table. Old-fashioned. Sophie was the worst one, because Sophie had been my favorite. She used to ask me to read her bedtime stories, but one day after hugging me she wrinkled up her little nose. "Grandpa, you smell funny." Rachel was right there, and instead of correcting her, she said, "Well, sweetie, Grandpa is old now. Old people just smell different." And from that day on, Sophie waved at me from across the room. She wouldn't come close, and I died a little every time I saw her, because it wasn't just her rejecting me. It was her being taught. One night Daniel told me, "Dad, I have some clients coming over for dinner. It would be better if you ate early, so you don't feel uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. He meant they didn't want me there. I ate alone in my room, listening to laughter in the dining room, crying with every bite. But the worst was the family Sunday. Rachel's parents, her brothers, her nieces and nephews. I dressed nice. I came downstairs in the navy shirt Maggie gave me. "Good afternoon," I said. Some people nodded. Some didn't even look up. The food was served. I went to sit at the table. Rachel stopped me with that fake smile. "Walter, there's just too many people. Why don't you eat in the kitchen so you have more room? More room." What she meant was, "You don't fit here." I ate alone in the kitchen, listening to laughter, listening to Daniel telling stories about work, sitting on a plastic stool next to the sink, and I realized I wasn't Walter Brennan anymore. I wasn't Daniel's father. I wasn't Tyler and Sophie's grandpa. I was just the old man in the way. And that night, lying in that little bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep begging for the right to exist. But I had nowhere to go. My savings were running thin. I'd given my pension away. I was trapped in a house where they hated me but needed my money. And for the first time in years, I thought about giving up, about just laying down in that bed and slowly disappearing, without a sound, because that was how they wanted me. Silent, invisible, dead while still breathing. The days started to look the same. Up before sunrise, so I could move without being a bother. Getting dressed in the dark. Tiptoeing down the stairs. Making coffee with the exact amount of water Rachel allowed. Walter, gas is so expensive. Walter, don't open the fridge so much. Walter, keep your showers under 5 minutes. I lived measuring everything. Measuring water. Measuring time. Measuring my own breath. Trying to take up as little space on this earth as possible. And then one Tuesday I started walking out at sunrise. I had nowhere to go. I just couldn't stand being there. I walked through Lincoln Park, past the lagoon, past kids playing and dogs running and joggers and cyclists. Everybody had a purpose. Everybody had somewhere to be. I had nothing. And one morning as I sat on a bench watching a kid feed pigeons, I thought, that little boy is more useful than me. He's feeding the pigeons. I'm just sitting here taking up space. That's when I found the library, the Lincoln Park branch on Fullerton. I walked in by accident. It smelled like old paper and floor wax and silence. And nobody looked at me. Nobody judged me. Nobody wrinkled their nose. So I stayed. I picked up a Steinbeck novel, sat in the back, and I breathed. For the first time in months, I just breathed. I went every day after that. 8 in the morning till 6 at night. Rachel was thrilled. It's good you're getting out, Walter. The air in the house is so much better now. She meant it literally. The air was better without me. And then one rainy Wednesday in March, a soft voice spoke right next to my table. That's a wonderful book. Is this your first time reading it? I looked up. She was probably mid-60s, silver hair pulled back, wearing a navy cashmere sweater and a thin gold scarf. She had these green eyes, the kind of eyes that actually saw you. Yes, I said. First time. She smiled. You're going to love it. Steinbeck just pulls you in. She sat across from me. Eleanor Whitmore. And that's how it started. Eleanor came to the library 3 afternoons a week. Her husband Charles, a well-known architect who designed half the buildings in the Loop, had passed 5 years earlier. Cancer. I took care of him until the end. She told me one afternoon over coffee in the library cafe. And when he was gone, I was just left in this enormous empty house. Her 2 children lived in California. They called once a month if she was lucky. I'm just here trying to fill the hours, she said. We were 2 of the same kind, 2 lonely people, 2 forgotten people. We met every day, talked about books, music, the lives we'd lived, the kids who'd left us behind. Eleanor never asked me why I spent 12 hours a day at the library. I never told her about the 8x8 room, but I think she knew. Because one afternoon, 2 months in, she said something that gutted me. Walter, you don't deserve to be sad. You deserve to be heard, and valued, and loved. And for the first time in years, somebody saw me. Really saw me. I cried right there in that library. And if you're listening to this, and you've ever felt invisible inside your own family, I want you to know that somewhere out there is a person who will see you. Don't lose hope. Just don't lose hope. The night of the shouting started without warning. Or maybe it warned me 100 times and I just refused to look. That afternoon at the library had been beautiful. Eleanor and I read poetry together. Then we walked across the street to the cafe and had hot apple cider. She told me about meeting Charles in Boston. I told her about meeting Maggie at a union dance in 1972. We laughed. We looked at each other a long time, and something neither of us was ready to name began to grow. I got back to Daniel's house at 7, late. The second I opened the door, I felt the tension. Daniel was standing in the living room, arms crossed. Rachel was banging pots in the kitchen. The kids were nowhere to be seen. Evening, I said. Nobody answered. Where the hell were you? Daniel asked. Voice low and shaking. The library, I said. Reading. Rachel appeared in the doorway. I made dinner 3 hours ago, Walter. 3. And you didn't even call. I started to apologize, but Daniel cut me off. Sit down, Dad. We need to talk. I sat. He stood. Rachel sat on the arm of the couch. And I knew right then this wasn't about dinner. This was the storm I'd been hearing build for 8 months. Daniel started in. Cold as ice. Dad, this can't keep going. You can't be here all day eating our food and using our electricity and then strolling around like you're on vacation. That's not fair. I tried. Son, I go out so I'm not in the way. I thought I was doing you a favor. Rachel laughed. A favor would be paying your share. A favor would be more than that miserable $800. Daniel nodded. Mom is right, Dad. $800 doesn't cover anything. Your blood pressure pills alone are $300 a month. We pay for those. I didn't know that. They never told me. Rachel pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She put it on the coffee table. Look, I did the math. Water, electric, gas, food, medicine, everything. You cost $2,400 a month. You contribute 8. We're losing $1,600 a month. Almost 20 grand a year. My whole life on a spreadsheet. And then Daniel said it. Leaned in. Looked me right in the eye. If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, Dad, go get yourself a job. Nursing home. He was threatening to send me to one of those places. And right then, something inside me died. It wasn't anger. It was peace. It was knowing for absolute certain that the boy I'd raised was gone. I stood up, walked upstairs, didn't say one word, sat on that little bed, and stared at the wall for I don't know how long. Then I pulled out the suitcase. The same suitcase from 8 months ago, and I started packing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with the suitcase open and shaking hands. Where was I going to go? I had no answer. The next morning I went down. Daniel was at the table. Morning, Dad, he said, like it was a normal day. Rachel came in. Are you going out to look for a job today? I just said. I'm going out to fix this. And I walked out. I walked for hours. Through Lincoln Park. Past the zoo. Past the conservatory. And eventually my feet brought me where they always brought me. The library. I sat at my usual table. I couldn't even open a book. Then I heard her voice. Walter. Eleanor. Standing there with concern in those green eyes. What happened? She whispered, and I broke. I told her everything. The shouting, the nursing home threat, the fake medication costs, the 8x8 room, the grandkids who wouldn't hug me, the kitchen meals, the cruise to Alaska I was apparently ruining. She held my hands across the table. Walter, I cannot believe your own son did this to you. You are a good man, a decent man, a man with worth. I shook my head. I don't know what I am anymore, Eleanor. She grabbed my face. Don't you ever say that again. You matter. And if your son can't see it, that's his blindness, not your worthlessness. We sat there a long time. Then she said something that changed everything. Walter, you are not going back to that house tonight. I have nowhere else to go. Eleanor. She squeezed my hand. Yes, you do. You have me. We left the library together. We went to a small diner on Halstead. She ordered us coffee and a piece of apple pie. And then she said, Walter, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been holding back. My husband Charles wasn't just any architect. He was one of the most successful in Chicago. When he died, he left me a brownstone in Lincoln Park. 2 cars. Investments. I don't tell you this to brag. I tell you because I need you to understand. I don't need money. I need company. I need someone who sees me as a person, not a wealthy widow to be exploited. I sat there stunned. The woman who'd been my friend for 5 months. She was a millionaire. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. She took my hand. Because what I'm about to ask you isn't charity. Walter, come live with me. I have a 4-bedroom brownstone. I live alone. I've been alone for 5 years. I need you. And you need a place where you're valued. And listen, if I were you watching this story, I'd be saying the same thing I said. Eleanor, I can't. That would be taking advantage of you. She squeezed harder. Walter, I have been alone in that house for half a decade. You are saving me as much as I'm saving you. I started crying. There in that diner. Charity, she repeated. It's not charity. It's friendship. It's what we both need. Eleanor, what will people say? I asked. They'll say I'm with you for your money. She smiled. Do you care what people say? I care what you think. She kissed my hand. I think anyone who believes that has never known real loneliness. Money doesn't fill empty nights. You make me feel alive again. I stood up, walked around to her side of the booth, and I hugged her right there. I accept, I whispered. We finished the coffee. We got into her black Mercedes. Me sitting in the passenger seat of a car like I'd never been in. We drove to Daniel's house. She parked at the curb. Engine running. Do you want me to come in? She asked. No, I have to do this alone. I went up to my room, finished packing. My whole life into one suitcase. As I came down the stairs, Daniel saw me with the bag. Dad, where are you going with that? I didn't answer. I kept walking. Rachel came running from the kitchen. Walter, did you find a job? I opened the front door. They followed me onto the porch. Daniel saw the Mercedes at the curb. Saw Eleanor in the driver's seat waiting for me. His mouth fell open. Dad, who is that? I walked down the steps, opened the rear door, put the suitcase in, got in the passenger seat, looked at Eleanor. Let's go. We pulled away from the curb. I watched in the side mirror as Daniel and Rachel stood frozen on that porch. Their problem solving itself, just not the way they wanted. We drove north into Lincoln Park. Eleanor turned onto a tree-lined street, stopped in front of a beige 3-story brownstone with stone steps and a wrought iron rail and ivy climbing the walls. This is home, she said. I almost couldn't get out of the car. Inside it was breathtaking. Hardwood floors, a staircase with carved oak banisters, paintings, light pouring through 12-foot windows. She showed me a guest room twice the size of the entire downstairs of my old house. King bed, private bathroom, bay window over the garden. I sat down on the edge of that bed, and I just cried. The next day Daniel started calling. I didn't answer. He called 15 times in 3 days. The voicemails went from angry to scared to begging. Dad, please come home. Forgive me. Let's talk. Home. What a word. That place was never my home. After a month and a half, I finally answered. He cried on the phone. He apologized. He said Rachel was sorry. The kids were asking. I listened, and then I said, I accept your apology, but I am not coming back. I have a place where I'm happy. He cried harder. Can I visit you? Eventually. Not now. And then I learned something that changed everything. I went to the Walgreens in Lincoln Park to fill my blood pressure prescription. The pharmacist rang it up. $40, sir. 40. I asked, Are you sure? The generic, he said. Same medicine. I went home in shock. Eleanor was furious. They lied to you, Walter. They inflated everything. To control you. To make you feel guilty. And then I understood the rest. Daniel and Rachel knew about the $80,000 I had in the credit union. The other half of the house money. They were waiting. Waiting for me to die so they could inherit it. That's why they kept me around. Not for love. For the money I'd built with my own hands over 42 years. And now, I was gone. And so was their inheritance. And here's the kicker. A cousin of mine called me from the old neighborhood. Walter, did you hear? They canceled the Alaska cruise. The miserable $800 Rachel laughed at was actually keeping the lights on. They only realized it when it was gone. 3 months in, I write this. 3 months living with Eleanor in Lincoln Park. Every morning I still wake up not believing it's real. I wake up in a sunny room. I walk down to the kitchen. Eleanor is making coffee. She looks up and smiles and says, Good morning, Walter. Like she means it. We have breakfast together. Talk about the news. About the books we're reading. We took the train to Galena last month. Walked along the Mississippi River. Held hands at sunset. Eleanor introduced me to her circle. Widows and widowers. Retired professors. Cultured, kind people. Eleanor calls me a writer at her dinner parties. And I am one now. I'm writing my memoirs in her study. Every afternoon, writing about Maggie, about my factory years, about the boy Daniel used to be. 2 weeks ago, Daniel came to visit. Eleanor let him in. He stopped in the foyer staring at the staircase. The paintings. He came into the living room. His eyes were red. I came to apologize in person, Dad. Not over the phone. We sat. Eleanor brought us coffee and quietly left. Daniel looked around. You live better than I do, he said quietly. It's not about better, son, I said. It's about with dignity, he cried. I failed you, Dad. Yes, I said. You did. But I also failed you. I gave you everything without teaching you the value of any of it. And now we both pay for that. He hugged me before he left. Can I visit again? Yes, but come because you want to see me, not from obligation. And bring the kids. After he left, Eleanor came back in. Did you really forgive him? She asked. I forgave him for me, I said. Not for him. The wound is still there. Eleanor nodded. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, Walter. It just stops you from carrying it as a weapon. She was right. And here is what I want to tell every single person watching this. especially every senior citizen out there in this country. You have rights. In Illinois, there are elder abuse statutes. The Department on Aging has a hotline. AARP has resources. If your family is making you feel like a financial burden, like a problem, like you're worthless, that's not love. That's exploitation. And you do not have to take it. You worked your entire life. You raised your children. You paid into Medicare and Social Security. You built this country with your hands. You are not a burden. You are an elder. And in a healthy society, elders are honored, not tucked away in a tiny room, not threatened with nursing homes, not put on spreadsheets. The lesson I learned at 71 years old is this: old age is not the end. It's just another chapter. And it can be a beautiful chapter if you have the courage to choose the right people. Respect is not begged for. It is earned. And the people who refuse to give it to you do not deserve your presence. Family is not always blood. Sometimes family is the woman who sees you in a public library and tells you that you matter. The mistake most people make is staying. Staying because they feel guilty. Staying because they're scared. Staying because they think this is just how it has to be in old age. It doesn't have to be that way. And the action I want you to take today is small. Just one thing. Pick up the phone. Call your aging mother. Call your aging father. Call the elderly neighbor who lives alone. Ask how they are. Really ask. Listen to the answer. And the question I want you to ask yourself tonight as you fall asleep is this: are you treating the elders in your life like people or like obligations? Because the day will come when somebody asks the same question about you. And before I finish this story, I have something to ask you, and I really do read the comments. Comment number 1 if you think Walter did the right thing leaving when he did. Comment number 2 if you think Daniel and Rachel deserve to be forgiven faster than 3 months. Comment number 3 if you've ever found yourself in a situation like this and didn't know how to get out. And right below that, tell me where you're watching this from. What city? What country? What time it is right where you are. I love reading those messages from all over the world. Every one of them reminds me that none of us are alone, that somebody out there understands, that we are all just human beings trying to get through this life with a little bit of dignity. This is a fictional story, inspired by the kind of cases that play out in millions of American households every day. But it has been 100% rewritten in my own words from Chicago to bring you something original and meaningful. A story that hopefully reminds you that you are never too old to choose yourself. If this story moved you, please give it a like. Subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. Because every single day I share more real stories like this. Stories of people just like you and me. Thank you for listening to the very end. Thank you for letting Walter's story matter to you. And remember, you deserve dignity. You deserve respect. You deserve to be seen. And it is never, ever too late to start a brand new chapter.